All right, women's rights movement. Here we go. As we finish Unit 5 with the women's rights movement and abolition. The Industrial Revolution and industrialization, the birth of cities, all that is Unit 6, and that will commence, 2 Mondays from now. All right. Also, don't forget, if you want to unvirtual, you have until April 1st to unvirtual. If you are uncomfortable with between 18 and right now 20, 21 kids being in here, you have until April 1st to go virtual. All right. But don't come. It'll be fun. All right. So here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Hello. Not what I want. Keep the mouse up here on this screen. There we go. That's what I want. Okay. So here we go. Oh. Okay. All right. So women's rights movements, many women believe the values of the Enlightenment. So the ideas of the Enlightenment were not male only. The ideas of equality, liberty, democracy should apply to men and women. Are we seeing this? Yes, no, Sam, Campbell. Okay, thank you. Okay. The feminist movements demanding women's rights emerged in France. They emerged in Britain. They emerged in the United States. These movements challenged the longstanding political and gender hierarchies, the patriarchal makeup of the world in which we live, were challenged by women at this time. I need to be able to see it. All right. All right. Yeah. All right. Many French women hoped the revolution would grant them rights as well. Again, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, they felt should include them because they are citizens and they should be a part of this. So the big trick was going to be, will the French Revolution carry over? Will the ideas of the enlightened thinkers carry over? Will it afford women opportunities heretofore withheld? Citizenship, which should be somewhat interesting or troubling or alarming or reason for pause. The fact that in some European countries, in some places in the world, even today, women are citizenship rights aren't quite the same. And suffrage, the right to vote. It'd be very nice. Women think if they could have a right to vote, since they make up roughly half the voting bloc. All right. Olympia de Gouges wrote the Declaration of Rights of Woman and the Female Citizen in 1791 during the French Revolution, right around the time that the French were writing the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. If you compare them side by side, they are similar. The changes are the obvious ones. Where it is gendered, whereas genderified, it is changed. Genderfied, not gentrified. And rights that are particularly lacking to women were included. Olympia de Gouges demanded that French women be given the same rights as French men. Again, if all people are equal, then all rights should be, if natural rights and inalienable rights are God-given rights, and if all people on the earth, talking back, Middle Ages, Renaissance, Enlightenment, are creations of God, then all people should benefit from these rights. It seems like a cogent argument. Mary Wollstonecraft, an English author, wrote A Vindication of the Rights of Women. She is also the mother of Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. Oops, sorry. Hold back up. And again, because of that great invention, the printing press, lots of women are going to get this information, and men if they so choose to read it. All right. She argued that women appear inferior to men because of a lack of education. It has nothing to do with anything else other than opportunity of education. One of the first women to ever graduate from, I believe it was Yale Medical School in America, was unable to practice medicine because of her gender, even though she went through the school. For the longest time, jobs, professions, I mean, even to this day, just slowly but surely, there's less of a distinction and delineation. You know, growing up as a kid, you know, when I was a child, girls didn't do math and science. And yet most of my chemistry teachers in high school and biology teachers in high school were women. So men weren't teachers. Like if you were growing up back then in the late 1800s, early 1900s in public education in Europe and in the United States, single women were teachers. And they lived in houses, like apartments all by themselves. And when they got married, they had to stop teaching. So there were definitely distinctions and roles set up for the various people. All right. Make women rational creatures and free citizens, and they will quickly become good wives. That is, if men do not neglect the duties of a husband and fathers. In other words, give us the same opportunities. We can be a good wife. If you know, men do what they're supposed to do. That's a nice little jab there. I like that. All right. That was weird. Is he still here? First parent ever to like sit and watch. Okay. John Stuart Mill, an English utilitarian who invented the word feminism, denounced the legal and social inequalities women face. This is the late 18th century. This early 19th century. And imagine, this is a guy came up with the word feminism. This is a man, probably a prominent man, saying out loud to whoever that how women are viewed is wrong and should be corrected. I'm sure that went over well. You're sitting there. I don't know the width of the camera on my laptop. I guess it can see me. All right. Yeah, maybe this won't block anybody. All right. The legal subordination of one sex to another is wrong in itself, and now one of the chief hindrances to human improvement. In other words, we shouldn't do it in the first place, and it's keeping us from reaching our fullest potential. Admitting that power and privilege to one side and not the other is not the right course of action. All right. Under whatever conditions and within whatever limits men are admitted to the suffrage, there is not a shadow of justification to not admit women to the same. So there's really no reason for women not to be able to do what they do. And it's that same woman. Read. Many Europeans saw the ideal middle-class woman as an angel in the house, the moral guardian. Men were incapable back then of being the moral guidepost of the home. And it was up to the woman to be the moral fabric, to teach the moral, what's the word? Things. That's really not the word I'm looking for. But to be that moral compass, to teach the children right from wrong, and even, hopefully, rub off on the husband. Most women in the workforce were either single, very few married women worked outside the home, or they're from the lower class. So when we get to industrialization, again, remember, this is going on, this part of our conversation historically is going on at the same time of the Industrial Revolution. That was just removed, and we'll talk about that separately after spring break. But if you're working in a factory and you're a female in the late 18th, and throughout the 19th century, chances are you're single. Chances are you're young. Chances are you're leaving the farm to go get a job in the city to help the family. Daycares and things of that sort are non-existent. Only if you have the money can you hire a nanny or a live-in or something like that. So typically, when a woman has a child, the children become the job and the home becomes the workplace. And also remember, too, before the factories, how did you get cloth? How did you get wool or thread? You're muted, Kylie, if you were trying to talk. Anybody remember this? Yes, you made it. You make it in a factory too, Ben. Where was it made? In your home. Very good. What was the system called? What were the industries called?
The cottage industry?
Yes, thank you. Cottage industries, because you worked out of your home, out of your cottage. So women who were married or women with children could still work. They would just do it from home. Factory work was single women or younger or girls. Another reason for a lot of girls in factories is you could pay them half as much. And then you could pay children half as much. So there you go. So if a guy's $1 an hour, the girl's 50 cents an hour, and the kid's a quarter. That's an oversimplification, but it's just to prove a point. Law codes in most European countries gave women few legal rights. They didn't give them property rights. They didn't give them custody rights. No matter how abusive the husband was, the father got the kids. In much earlier times, in colonial periods and in the early 18th century, if a woman, I know this exists in colonial America, if a woman wanted to bring charges against the man, in some places the man had to allow it. So very few rights for women. And part of it too, that kind of works to women's detriment, is that men in society at large, or Western society at large, because remember, it's not the same in African societies, it's not the same in East, Southeast Asian societies, or in Amerindian societies. They saw it as protecting them from a world that was just dirty and brutish and just not nice and violent and not a place for women. Politics were not a place for women for the longest time. So the idea of keeping a woman on a pedestal, so to speak, and keeping her safe from all things also plays into this, as well as sexism and other things, and just other cultural notions. In 1848, we jump ahead, the Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York, demanded voting rights. And these two women, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, led this call. When I was, in the late 70s, I believe, Susan B. Anthony was put on currency in American history, as American money. And we're about to get another woman on American money. Anybody know who it's going to be?
Harriet Tubman.
Harriet Tubman.
Yes, very good. And this is the Women's Rights Convention. These are all the ladies who came, and even some gentlemen who came. These were speakers, these were presenters, these were members of the audience. Seneca Falls, New York, over 2 days in 1848. Told you, 1848 is a big year. Women generally are neither by nature nor habit, nor education, nor by their necessary condition in society fitted to perform this duty of voting with credit. This was the thought process of most men in power in the early, middle, late 19th century, early 20th century, current 21st century. There are people. I don't know when they're going to produce the Harriet Tubman thing. I'm sure it has not been approved yet. But I don't know. Like, I know it wasn't, I mean, it's been talked about now since the Obama administration. So it's just a question of getting the Treasury Department to okay it, I guess. And I don't know the mechanism for determining how currency changes. Like, I don't know who does that. So I'm not going to give you some bogus made up answer because I'm an adult. I don't know. Okay. Whoops. Stanton wrote the Declaration of Sentiments, also modeled after the Declaration of Independence, stating that all men and women are created equal. Also modeled after the French model by de Gouges. So the Enlightenment does not go away. It moves. It diffuses into other parts of the planet. It diffuses into other social groups. It's going to trickle down to the lower classes eventually. But the big catalyst for this is literacy and education. Not necessarily the printing press, but the fact that more and more women are in school. And by the time we get into the 1800s, in various parts of the world, school is compulsory. Most of it is still private. But remember, we talked about a couple places. What was the first country to have health reform? And I'm going to assume public education? Germany. Very good. Both parts of class. I'm telling you, people will dominate the breakfast thing if you guys show up. All right. And then when we get to the end of the 19th century, Massachusetts becomes the first state in America to have compulsory state public education. Not surprisingly, they're also the first state to have running water, like sewage and all that kind of stuff. So, blah, blah, blah. Not that it's not important. It's just a big thing. Going back to Europe. In 1857, divorce is finally legalized in Britain. Holy cow. In 1884, in France, Catholic countries like Spain and Italy did not permit it. Yes, Lucas. Or is that Campbell's hand?
When it said divorce was legalized, does that mean, like, could it be initiated by women or was it initiated by men?
I don't know. So I'm going to write that down so I don't forget to look that up. It would seem that because of the topic we're in, that it means women can file. That's the way it would seem. But we can all look it up and find out. That's an excellent question. I assume. I don't know why it wouldn't be legal in the first place outside of Catholic countries where you can't divorce. The church has to. Not disavow, but nullify your marriage. Okay. Okay, this is definitely not a 19th century picture, but that's okay. It still matters. The women's rights movement had many members, but enjoyed few successes. By 1900, no major country still gives women the vote. So suffrage is a ways away. Oh, what was the family's name in Mary Poppins? Anyway, that mother was a suffragette. She was trying to give English women the right to vote, going out and pamphleteering. Now, this is definitely a 20th century picture. Probably World War II-ish with the whole Rosie the Riveter thing, and the men are fighting so the women are building. Still doing their part. The abolitionist movement. Okay, so to wrap it up, the last half of the 19th century. Thank you, Mr. Hood. The last part of the 19th century is you start to see women begin to clamor more and more and more for a say in their lives, really, and in the societies in which they live. And it coincided with the next slide, the abolitionist movement. I mentioned this yesterday. Women were the loudest voices, some of the loudest voices in the United States with respect to ending slavery. Some of it was because they understood the unjust nature of it. Some of it was an understanding that their rights to be seen as an equal and full citizen in this country are not going to happen, are not going to be fostered if every man, regardless of their station in life, isn't afforded the same rights first. So there was this recognition that it had to be the men first and then them. Whether that's right or not is a topic for another day. The abolitionist movement, the act of abolishing, the movement to end something. In this case, slavery, owning people. All right. Oh, who is this person? In the 1780s, the abolitionist movement began blending Enlightenment thought and Christian principles. Again, God created all people, so why can you own some people and not others? That's a valid argument. What did I see on the news? I can't remember the state. They were arguing in the state legislature, and it was about I think it was in Georgia after the government made all those changes to voting laws. Some guy in the audience said, "Nowhere in the Bible does Jesus say anything negative about slavery." So that was their justification. And another woman used the justification that they shouldn't be allowed to vote because it's a Sabbath. And I'm like, but anyway. Although I'm not the same color as you, I've always regarded you as my brothers. Nature formed you with the same spirit, the same reason, the same virtues as whites. Reducing a man to slavery, buying him, selling him, keeping him in servitude, those are truly crimes, and crimes worse than theft. In fact, they take from the slave not only all forms of property, but also the ability to acquire it, the control over his time, his strength, of everything that nature, remember this inalienable stuff, has given him to maintain his life and satisfy his needs. It follows from our principles that we require the destruction of slavery. This is the Marquis de Conserve, and this is in an essay on the reflections on Negro slavery in 1781. So before the French Revolution, during the Enlightenment in Europe, talk of abolishing slavery is well underway. Now, if we're being pragmatic and if we're being realistic about this, and I think this is where context matters. Potentially, hypothetically, or based upon what you know, I guess is the same thing 3 different ways. Why might it be easier for a European to talk about ending this than a South Carolinian in 1781, or Virginian, or there's no Kentucky yet, or North Carolinian? Whoever that is, talk. Okay,
Was
Mary.
it because they were less reliant on the slaves?
Part of it, yeah. There's I don't know how much plantation life there is in Europe. Why else? What else? The economy is an important factor, Mary. So thank you for that one-word answer. In this case, it's good because it's a jumping off point to others. It's also, I'm glad you're here because I didn't see your face. Why What about the economy in Europe makes slavery such an easier thing to address than the economy in America? And it's okay if you're unsure and you're guessing. That's why it's
Agriculture.
Where, Ben? What do you mean agriculture?
Like Europe didn't rely as much on agriculture as the Americas, because the Americas had all the plantations.
Sort of, kind of. Remember, it is still the most popular. More people farm still than any other job on the planet, just not in America.
Maybe in Europe they farmed more just to live, and they didn't do as many cash crops, and their crops weren't like cotton and sugar, so they didn't.
Well, they can't. Well, you're right, Lucas. They can't be sugar. It's not going to grow. That's why they
can't grow it. That's why they don't do it.
Right. That's why. Well, that's why they have plantations in the Americas. Okay, the same reason it's easier, the same reason, well, it's easier in France and those places too, because there aren't as many. They haven't colonialized yet, like they're about to, hello, Africa. The Industrial Revolution begins in Europe. So the birth of that type of workforce is, beginning to take the shape it's going to take. In the northern states of the United States, slavery is legal. Every single state had slaves at one point or another, but by the time we get until 1780, the northern states realize this is stupid. They don't end slavery because it's morally reprehensible. Some might, but it didn't economically make sense to do it because of the size of the farms involved. So context, so situation matters. The geography of the Americas, the climate of the Americas, the unfortunate circumstance of disease, the need for labor, all of those things all of those things serve to to necessitate some other labor force. Those factors aren't in Europe. So, let's not think for a minute that every single European is like kumbaya to everybody, because, go talk to the Jews. Don't worry about the book. Anyway, morals are equal. It is not birth, okay? But virtue alone makes the difference. All right, that just goes back to the argument. William Wilberforce. British Parliament passed a law ending their involvement in the slave trade. So in 1807, Britain, the entire British colony, stops. In 1808, the U.S. stops. In 1814, France. 1817, the Netherlands. In 1845, ironically, Spain. So those last countries were using it as a revenue stream, not as a labor force. If you're Spain and you're struggling to maintain validity, I need revenue. Well, I know people who will buy these people. But eventually, the Enlightenment and probably European pressures and probably just the realization that, no, we shouldn't be doing this, slave trade stops. With the ending of slaves coming to America in 1808, the price goes up. Obviously, supply and demand works that way. Female slaves become more valuable than male slaves after 1808 because they are the slave producers. So the dynamics of slavery shift when you stop importing your labor. Okay. The HMS Brisk capturing the slave ship Emanuela. There's a movie called Amistad, which is about a slave ship called the Amistad. And it's an excellent movie. When I taught American history, I showed the film. And it kind of goes into the detail of the slave ship and the capturing of the slaves. Yes, Ben?
Is that the one directed by Steven Spielberg?
Yes.
Oh, I know a really interesting story about like how that happened.
Well, what do you mean how it happened?
I'll share. There's a have you ever heard of This American Life?
The NPR show?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they did a show about this, I think it was like an inner city school and these students went on a field trip and watched what movie was it? It may have been Schindler. I think it was Schindler's List. And there were some kids cutting up during it and it turned into this huge thing. And anyways, like they were getting bashed because they were cutting up during Schindler's List. And then Steven Spielberg came to their school and they were like having a discussion about, you know, racism and all this types of different things. And one student said, like, why is there no movie about our Holocaust, meaning slavery? And then that movie came out.
It was actually filmed in Mystic, Connecticut, and they had to shut down Highway Interstate 95 while they were filming. That was a pain because I was stationed in Connecticut and living in Connecticut when they were filming it. It was filmed at the seaport. But that's a cool story. And the history teacher in me is like, well, it really wasn't the Holocaust. But that's okay. I get their point. All right. British Navy enforced the end of the slave trade, but illegal trade continues for years. You know, pirates. The British committed 25 ships and 3,000 men to patrol the coast of Africa between 1808 and all the way to 1860 to stop this trade in human cargo. They freed over 150,000 Africans during this time period. So imagine how many more cultures and civilizations would be altered forever without this intervention. I didn't realize it went that long. I was aware of the British Navy doing this, but I didn't know it went to basically the outbreak of the Civil War. In 1804, slavery ended in Haiti when their independence was established. That is one way to end slavery. Revolt, uprise, and overthrow the government. But again, contextually speaking, what next? What does Haiti do next? Okay, and Haiti's tragic. Literally Shakespearean in its, I bet that's for you. It's tragedy. Me, I'll shoot. What's up? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Doesn't care to you, check out it. Well, I guess you can figure out the time better. All right. That's like my first checkout of the year. Wait, I got a note. What was that? Hold on. Can I what? Go. Ugh. That one, Sam?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sorry, I was making sure my dog didn't track mud on my bed.
Don't let your dog on your bed.
I guess. Yeah, but she was already on my bed, so.
Who's the master? Who's the animal?
I'm the master and she's the
Yeah,
animal.
apparently not. Because that's the only place in my house my dog can't go. He does not get on my bed. All right. Slavery was banned in the British Empire by 1833. The United States by 1865. Well, that's what happens when you lose a war. And in Brazil in 1888. Fact. I don't know how fun it is. When the Civil War ended, lots of Southern plantation owners went to Brazil and took their slaves with them because it was still legal. This is the cotton planter and his pickers. West Point, Mississippi. When that's wow. His pickers. Economic, political, and social inequalities remain for former slaves for years to come or to the present day. Yeah, I've equated the slave in the South to the Southern factory. Like the first formal factory in the South doesn't open until like the late 1830s, 1840s when they finally get their first factory. The infrastructure is such that it doesn't support industry. It doesn't have, I mean, Alabama has coal and ore. In the northern part of Alabama, Birmingham is called the Pittsburgh of the South. So there, how did the United States enforce the freeing of slaves? Well, first of all, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments made it illegal. Then they sent the army down, and that's the part post-Civil War part of American history called Reconstruction, where they try and reconstruct the nation. And the army was sent down to enforce the ending of slavery. If you pay somebody, they're still a slave. Can they leave on their own volition? Are they free to go? No, they're not. If it was 1840 and you paid all your slaves $50 a day, they're still slaves because you still own them. So it has nothing to do with the fact that they're making wages. In fact, in some cases, they had their own little plots of land and they could sell their crops for money. Or if they were a skilled blacksmith or a skilled carpenter, their slave owner would hire them off to other plantations and they could make a little money. A lot of them tried to make money to buy their freedom. Sharecropping is later. That's a 20th century thing. Sharecropping is later. We're not there yet, and we're probably not going to talk about that in this class. That's a push. 19th century abolitionist movement ended reliance on slavery and slave trade and set the stage for later equality movements. Something else. And again, this is why I think this note setup is smart. Because something else that made slavery less practical was industrialization. So the Enlightenment ideals of all people being equal, the practicality of owning and paying and providing and going to countries and robbing people of people, married with the fact that if I put these people in a factory, I can turn out just as much clothes. I mean, just the way countries were able to make money shifts. And yes, the demand for cotton isn't going to go away. But where does most of Europe after the Civil War start getting its cotton? Anybody know?
India.
India and Africa, Ethiopia, yep. Still from America, we're going to mechanize, but all right. And you're finished with Unit 5, ladies and gentlemen. Now, that's all I have. That's a pretty, women will come up again. The suffrage movements, especially the right to vote, is going to keep coming up and keep coming up. Their place in society is going to keep coming up. We're about to go from industrialization to imperialism. So the role of Africa and all this, and the role of Europe, and the mentality of Europe and the mentality of their view of Africa is going to, again, it's going to help you realize that the reason that they were talking about ending slavery was not really based on equality. It was based on practicality and the Enlightenment ideals. And then you're going to see a divergence, which there always is. All right. That is our live time for today. That is our live time for this half of our time together. The fourth quarter of your freshman year begins when we come back. Have a great break. Continue to work. Continue to turn things in. I will continue to grade. Everything's going to be fine. All the work is looking better. With those of you who are doing it, just understand what you're supposed to do to make the work better, and you'll be fine. I really wish I had a problem coming up about not having enough room for all of you. I would love as many of you to come back as possible. I think it would help a lot of you if you were in the room. It would help me if you were in the room. But life is what life is, and I respect that. So we'll see how many people I get on Thursday, a week from Thursday. And until then, make sure, don't forget to respond to my photographs so you know where I am in Disney. Your points stopped, so I need them if you want to use them if you haven't yet. That's it. I'm trying to drag this out, and there's really no need to.